August 15th, 1977, 2:16 a.m. In a small radio observatory just outside Delaware, Ohio, a signal cut through the static. No warning, no pattern, no second chance. It lasted 72 seconds. That was it. But those 72 seconds changed everything. The man who saw it, Jerry Amon, wasn't supposed to be there. He was a volunteer for the SETI project, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. He wasn't looking for aliens that night. No one was. He was just checking data, line after line. Thousands of characters from the sky printed on paper. Nothing ever stood out. Until it did. 6EQUJ5. That was the sequence. 6 letters and numbers. Bold. Loud. Mathematically impossible to ignore. He circled it in red ink, and beside it he wrote just one word. Wow. That word, scribbled in the margin of a dusty computer readout, would become the most mysterious footnote in the history of modern science. The WOW exclamation mark signal. But what was it? Where did it come from? Why did it never repeat? And why, 45 years later, do some believe it was the only message humanity ever received? The Big Ear telescope was enormous. Ugly. It looked more like a piece of Cold War artillery than a scientific instrument. 2 giant reflecting surfaces, metal sheets spread across the Ohio countryside. It wasn't built to find aliens. It was built to prove they didn't exist. SETI, the project behind the telescope, was desperate. Funding was low. Morale was lower. Congress laughed at the idea of listening to space. But the scientists, they kept listening anyway. Because sometimes, silence is louder than you expect. The signal came from Sagittarius, a place in the sky with nothing special in it. No bright stars, no black holes, no known satellites. The strength of the signal was extraordinary. Too clean to be background noise, too narrow to be natural. It hit like a bell, perfectly shaped, perfectly timed. Then silence, gone, no echo, no follow-up. Just that 72-second scream from the dark. Amon knew it was different. You can feel it in the tape he left behind, his voice shaking, not excited, but confused, nervous, like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to. Some said it was just a satellite, but it didn't match the orbital paths. Some blamed it on Earth-based interference, but it came from a part of the sky the dish only passed once. Others thought it was a glitch, but the system worked perfectly before and after. No one had answers, only red ink and silence. Weeks passed. Scientists ran the telescope again, pointed it at the same patch of sky. Nothing. They tried again. Nothing. They waited months. Still, nothing. But in that nothing, something else began to grow. Whispers, theories. What if it was real? What if, for 72 seconds, someone said hello? And what if they never said it again? In 1977, the world was full of noise. Cold War tension, nuclear tests, satellites in orbit, radio waves, screaming in every direction. But this signal, it was pure, focused, intentional. It rose in intensity like it was aimed directly at us. And then it vanished, as if someone flipped a switch, as if they were watching how we'd react. There's a reason governments didn't want to talk about the WOW signal, not because they knew what it was, but because they didn't, and that's far scarier. One classified memo, later uncovered in a FOIA request, included the WOW signal in a list of low-probability, high-impact cosmic threats. Next to it were only 2 other entries. 1. Rogue asteroid. 2. Intentional directed intelligence. That last phrase, never explained, just circled in pencil. The astronomers never found the source. The government never issued a formal statement, and Eamon, he never again saw anything like it. He kept the printout, framed it, stared at it for years, hoping. In 1985, 8 years later, SETI got funding for another sweep of the same region. They found nothing. The original equipment was dismantled. The big ear was torn down in 1998 to make way for a golf course. No joke. The site of the only possible alien message is now Hole 14. And the sky stayed quiet. But the story didn't end, because something else was happening. Behind the scenes, in labs, in basements, in secret meetings. People were starting to ask the question out loud. What if the message wasn't a mistake? What if it was the first contact? And we missed it. That's when the silence became louder than the signal. The kind of silence that tells you someone out there is watching. And the worst part, it never came back. But that doesn't mean it's gone. It means we were heard. And now, we're waiting for the reply. For 72 seconds. Earth was not alone. Then the sky closed, and science began to panic. It started in the control room. After Eamon circled the signal and whispered, "Wow," no one knew what to do. There was no protocol, no hotline. Just one question. What the hell was that? In the following days, astronomers scrambled to verify the source. They pointed the big ear back at Sagittarius. Again and again. Nothing. They called in engineers, checked for interference, recalibrated everything. Still, nothing. And that's when the fear set in. Because if it wasn't a glitch, if it wasn't a satellite, if it wasn't from Earth, then where the hell did it come from? SETI issued an internal bulletin, urgent but quiet. It didn't mention aliens. It just called the signal anomalous and non-repeating. But inside the team, the word no one dared to say was contact, and they knew it. By October, the story leaked. A science journal published the full coordinates. Other observatories tried to catch it. None succeeded. Meanwhile, theories piled up like funeral flowers. Solar flare, signal bounce, Russian test. Every one of them failed because nothing could explain the clarity, the precision, the intensity. Natural signals don't behave like that, and human signals are rarely that quiet. One scientist said it best. If this came from Earth, it came from someone far smarter than us. There was one attempt to dismiss it, a theory that it was caused by a military satellite's downlink. But the satellite in question hadn't been launched yet. Another theory claimed it was a reflected Earth-based signal, like radar bouncing off the moon. But the moon wasn't in the right position, and radio waves don't bounce that cleanly. It was like trying to find a scream in the middle of a hurricane, and realizing the scream had direction, rhythm, and meaning. Behind the scenes, SETI began what they called the Watch, an unofficial, round-the-clock sweep of the same coordinates. Volunteers stayed up for days. One man fell asleep at his desk and woke up in tears. He thought he'd missed it, but the truth was worse. There was nothing to miss. It never came again. And that kind of silence is not peaceful. It's loud. It's heavy. It feels like judgment. In December, a private memo from the National Radio Astronomy Observatory warned its staff, "Do not reference the WOW signal in public communication. There is no follow-up, and we do not support unverified speculation translation. We don't know what it was, so stop asking." But some didn't stop. Amateur astronomers, ham radio operators, students. They kept listening. Some claimed they heard echoes, weak, fragmented. One group in Argentina said they captured a shadow signal from the same direction, but it was corrupted, unintelligible, and never repeated. And then there was the incident in Canada. A group of physicists from the University of British Columbia attempted an experimental signal replay. They used the same coordinates, same frequency, and blasted a message back into the void. A simple phrase, "Is someone there?" The attempt went unreported. But 2 weeks later, their lab was broken into. Only the tapes were taken. No police report, no insurance claim, just silence. The lead researcher left academia the following year, moved to a remote village in northern Quebec. He's never spoken publicly since. Meanwhile, SETI collapsed under the weight of ridicule. Congress laughed them out of the budget room. They were labeled dreamers, conspiracy theorists. The WOW signal became a punchline, a relic, a red circle in the margin of a dead man's notebook. But some believed, some still listened, and they noticed something strange, a pattern. In the years following the signal, multiple unexplained objects were seen by military pilots, all near radio-sensitive zones, all moving at impossible speeds, all silent, officially unrelated, unofficially deeply unsettling. One classified report from 1980, obtained decades later, referenced an aerial phenomenon near the radio horizon and suggested a potential response to prior broadcast attempt. No further context, no name on the report, no agency admitted to writing it, but those who saw it knew. Whatever the WOW signal was, it came. It left. And something may have been listening. That's when the fear changed. It was no longer about what the signal was. It became about who had the technology to send it, and why they stopped. Because silence is never just silence. It's an answer. And what if the signal wasn't meant for Earth at all? What if we just intercepted it? What if we were never the intended audience? Just the ones who happened to be listening at the wrong time? The WOW signal never came back. And that silence was deafening. Not just because it meant the trail had gone cold, but because it meant something, or someone, had chosen not to speak again. SETI scientists called it the cosmic ghost, a term whispered more like a superstition than science, because every time they pointed a dish at that empty patch of sky, nothing, no sound, no distortion, not even a whisper of signal decay. It was as if that tiny voice from space had been erased. By 1981, SETI's internal logs started showing patterns of stress, missed shifts, psychological evaluations, arguments. One scientist reportedly locked himself inside the data vault overnight, convinced that the signal had hidden metadata, a message inside the message. He never found it. But he never worked in astronomy again either. The culture was shifting. The longer the signal stayed silent, the more ridicule they faced. The media treated it as a joke. One article from 1982 titled "Aliens Hung Up on Us" portrayed Eamon as a lonely man chasing voices in the sky. Even some in the scientific community began to disown the signal. It's not real if it doesn't repeat, they said. But they were wrong. Because in science, repetition is safety. It means you're in control. A predictable universe is a comfortable one. But the WOW signal was not predictable, and comfort had nothing to do with it. Behind closed doors, the U.S. government quietly distanced itself from the incident. A grant proposal titled "Deep Reacquisition of WOW Coordinates" was denied with the following note: due to the speculative nature and potential public misinterpretation, this proposal is not in alignment with national scientific interests. Translation: we're. But the questions didn't go away. If this wasn't a message to us, then what was it? A test transmission? A misfire? A warning? One theory, buried in a 1983 white paper, suggested that the signal could have been a type of beacon, meant not to communicate, but to mark, to tag a planet as noticed. The paper was destroyed in a fire 1 year later. No backups, just a footnote in an insurance report. There's a photo that circulates on conspiracy forums, taken at a military listening post in 1985. A chalkboard with 4 words written in bold white, no contact, no echo. No one knows who wrote it, but every operator on that base was rotated out within a month. Meanwhile, strange things began happening across the globe. In 1987, a power surge at a radio observatory in India wiped 5 years of data from their servers. The only file that survived? A partial digital copy of the WOW signal's frequency spike. Unedited, pure, still unexplained. In 1990, an amateur astronomer in Ukraine claimed to have recorded a mirror signal, structurally identical, but in reverse. It lasted exactly 72 seconds, then nothing. His home burned down a week later. The tape was never recovered. Coincidence? Maybe. But every trail that led to the WOW signal eventually vanished, or was made to vanish. By the mid-90s, interest had dried up. SETI became little more than a fringe movement. The big ear was dismantled, the coordinates were forgotten, and the sky went back to silence. But not everyone forgot. A small group of former SETI volunteers formed an underground archive, unofficial, unfunded, hidden. They called themselves the Repeaters. Their belief that the signal wasn't over. It was waiting for us to evolve, to listen better, to respond differently. And maybe they were right. Because silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it means anticipation. And what if the message wasn't a message at all? What if it was a question? And what if our silence was the wrong answer? Imagine this. You hear a knock at your door. You open it. There's no one there. Just silence. But now, you know someone was on the other side. You are not alone. You're not sure if they're still there, but you can feel their eyes, watching, waiting. That is what the WOW signal was. A knock, a breath, a presence, then nothing. And yet, in that silence, the world changed. SETI didn't die, it evolved. Today, we listen with better tools, better algorithms, better ears, and still, nothing. Not a single signal since 1977 has matched the clarity, intensity, or shape of the WOW signal. Nothing even close. It remains to this day the most likely candidate for extraterrestrial contact in human history, and we still don't know what it was. The most accepted theory now? It was real, just not meant for us. Like overhearing a conversation in the next room, in a language you don't speak. You know it's happening, but you have no idea what's being said, or who's speaking, or if they even know you're listening. Some believe the signal came from a probe, not a planet, that it passed near Earth, sent its pulse, and moved on. A kind of galactic census, a cosmic ping. Others believe it wasn't a message at all, but a warning, a flash of code saying, "We see you. Stay silent. Do not respond." In recent years, some physicists have posed a darker theory, that the WOW signal was not just contact, but bait. And our greatest achievement, detecting it, was also our greatest mistake. Because now we've been marked, logged, filed. And what if that silence isn't emptiness? What if it's strategy? We assume they want to talk, but what if they don't? What if the universe is full of watchers, but no voices? And the WOW signal was the only voice brave or foolish enough to speak. What if we were warned and we never heard it? As we scan the sky today with satellites more powerful than ever before, there's still a hole, right there in Sagittarius, a place where something once spoke and never did again. And so we ask, are we alone? Or are we being ignored? And which of those answers is worse?